Gillen, Vice President of the Board of the Historical Society of Mount Lebanon. On behalf of the membership and board, I'd like to welcome you to our 2023 annual fundraiser video. This year, we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Historical Society. It began in November 1998 when the founding board members met to create this organization. Collecting archival materials related to Mount Lebanon and presenting programs began almost immediately, even though we did not have a physical space in the community until 2009. In 2009, the Historical Society rented space in the basement of this building, and it's a true sign of the progress of our organization and the devotion of our board and volunteers and the community that we now have this beautiful space for our visitors. There is still more to do, and we look forward to creating a gorgeous rooftop deck and to renovating the basement to include a kitchen and event space. If you haven't yet visited the History Center in person, please do so. We are open every Saturday from 9 until 3. Throughout the year, the Historical Society offers rotating exhibitions, walking tours across Mount Lebanon, and programs and events. We are especially proud of the program that brings every second grader in Mount Lebanon on a special walking tour of Uptown to learn about the buildings and their community. Thanks to all of you who participated in many of our sold-out programs this year. This video is accompanied by an online auction and also an in-person fundraising event. We would like to extend our very sincere thanks to Alyssa Jones and Peggy Wojcik for their tireless work as co-chairs of what will definitely be a fun and fabulous party here at the History Center on October 5th. We also thank the hardworking group of board members and volunteers who reached out to local businesses and community leaders to support the online auction. These people are Jody Colby, Bruce Harshman, Kathy Hayes, Jenna Latour-Nichols, Susan Morgans, Beth Romig, and Jim Wojcik. Please check out the online auction and bid. There are some really terrific items, and every dollar goes directly to supporting the Historical Society. I mentioned that this year we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Historical Society. As part of that celebration, we have a new exhibit that features 50 objects from the collection. This very fun exhibit was developed by Dr. Michael Cahall, one of our past board presidents and a devoted volunteer. In this video, we will highlight a few of those objects, but please do come by and see it in person. It is a wonderful exhibit full of Mount Lebanon history. Finally, the most important thing to say is that this History Center and the Historical Society would not exist without all of the people who've been behind it for the past 25 years. We are proud of the progress we've made and thankful for the volunteers and support of the community. The Historical Society is a wonderful asset to our wonderful neighborhood, and its board and volunteers are committed to making it an even more important community resource over the next 25 years. Enjoy these photos of Historical Society events and volunteers at work. To everyone in these photos, to everyone who worked on this year's fundraising event, and most especially to our members, supporters, volunteers, and visitors. This is all here because of you.
One of the most important roles that the Society plays in our community is to be a place where people can donate articles and objects that tell the history of Mount Lebanon. In the 25 years that the Historical Society has been in existence, we now have more than 3,000 objects and items in our collection. People began donating objects to our collections once they heard about the Historical Society being formed in 1998. What I want to show you now are the first two items that were donated to the Historical Society. This is items number 1 and 2 in our collection. This is a hand-sewn dress and coat that are from the late 1800s, early 1900s. They're hand-sewn, made of silk, and they come to us through the McCormick family. The McCormick family were one of the early settlers in the area of Mount Lebanon. The father, Joseph, was a physician who came here in 1857. One of his sons, Thomas, was a school teacher, and he is actually the second person on the left that you see here in the photo with a fancy suit. He's standing in front of the house he had built just down the street from the Historical Society on the corner of Washington Road and Hazel Drive. And this house was built around 1880. It's now, if you're not sure where Washington Road and Hazel Drive are, it's where the Southminster parking lot is today. Okay. The house was actually existed in that location until about the 1950s. So really, again, objects 1 and 2 are just part of the 50 objects we have here on display that are Mount Lebanon Treasures. So please, please come into the History Center to see the other 48 objects we have.
Hi, I'm Dave Frankowski. I'm a member on the board of the Historical Society of Mount Lebanon, and I have the privilege of talking about one of the items that are going to be in the new display. So we have it right here. It is from the Bar Hill Brailleist Foundation. This is a Perkins Brailer, which was used by members of that organization. The purpose of the Bar Hill Brailleist Association was they were a service organization. They were formed in 1964, and their purpose was to supply Braille materials to visually impaired people that maybe weren't available in the general realm of things, and they would actually do custom work. So the volunteers would have training on how to braille. They would braille the materials. They would take requests. Their organization was well known all over the country because not every printed item that exists is in Braille. And people sometimes want specialty things. And I think they started at the church, and they started doing church bulletins. They would take custom requests for items such as menus for restaurants, etc., and it gradually expanded. But they became known for being able to do that. And so they have a long history. And we have all of the artifacts from the organization. They were a service organization. They were much like the Mount Lebanon Women's Club. I think most of the members were women, and they would train on how to use the brailer. And we happen to have, we have many items from their club, but the item we have on display is a Perkins brailer, which is what one of the volunteers would have used. Now, the Perkins brailer is called the Perkins brailer because it was developed at the Perkins School for the Blind in Massachusetts. Now, I kind of like to think that the Perkins brailer kind of has a little bit of a Mount Lebanon connection. Perkins School for the Blind was, one of the co-founders was Samuel Gridley Howe. His wife is Julia Ward Howe, which just happens to be the name of one of the elementary schools in Mount Lebanon. So I think there's a slight connection. Anyway, the volunteers would use this item called the Perkins brailer, and I will give you a demonstration of it. It's much like a typewriter, except that there's only there's less keys, but there's a space bar, and I'll explain how it works in a second. But this is the item that we have on display, and you'll be able to see something written in Braille on the Brailler, and when you're here, you may be able to figure out, decode what's on there. The Perkins Brailler is much like a typewriter in that it requires paper. And Braille paper is heavier stock paper. It's cut to a certain size so it fits, and I'm going to insert a piece in. So now I'm all set to Braille. So Braille is a system of 6 dots, and the dots are arranged in 2 rows. They call it a cell, and it starts at the top, and there's dots on the left side are 1, 2, and 3, one under the other, and then 4, 5, and 6. Combination of those dots in the Braille cell make up a letter. So, for example, the letter A is simply dot 1. So I have my Brailler here. Now, in order to make the dots, each of the 6 keys here, and this one, whoever was using it, they left number 2, 3, and 5, 6. This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the transcriber would have to put their fingers like so, and you push down the number of keys to get to do the letter. So say I'm going to do the letter A. It's just simply the first one. So I press down. It transcribes it and then moves on to the next one. But when you come up here, you'll be able to see it, and we'll have some materials that are Braille that you might be able to read.
One of the objects in the exhibition is this 50th anniversary commemorative plate. In 1962, Mount Lebanon celebrated its 50-year history as a separate township, having been divided from Scott Township in February of 1912. Among the many commemorative items were plates such as this, and also commemorative coins, which you can see in the exhibition. This plate was made by Kettle Springs Kilns of Alliance, Ohio, and it depicts the 14 houses of worship that were in Mount Lebanon at that time. The plate documents continuity in our community. Most of the churches and the synagogue depicted on the plate are still active and exist in Mount Lebanon today, but it also shows change over time. Of the 14 houses of worship shown here on the plate, 2 of them no longer exist. Those 2 are the Our Savior Lutheran Church and also the First Church of Christ Scientist of Mount Lebanon. There also is some change shown in other buildings that are on here with organizations that do still exist. For example, the Holy Cross Greek Orthodox Church is shown in its former location on the plate, and it of course is now in a new location on Gilkison Road. The St. Winifred's Roman Catholic Church had not yet been built when the plate was made, and so that is not included on here on this plate from 1962.
One of the other items in our 50 treasures, and kind of in my opinion, the neatest one that we've got on display, is Dr. Cyrus Schreiner's medical stuff, I'll call it. He was an early physician in the South Hills of Pittsburgh, got here in like 1875-ish or so, and he started practicing in the South Hills. And what we have on display are things like his ledger book, where he recorded the fees he charged. And, boy, talk about inflation of medical. I mean, we've got visits where he charged $1.50, $2 to see a patient. And, he made house calls, okay, with that price. We also have his book that he put together in beautiful penmanship of his prescriptions that he would mix in there. Actually, also in there is the formula he used for black shoe polish, okay, mixed in with the other things. The really interesting thing to me is his amputation kit. Okay, this thing was used to amputate. You could see the tourniquet. We've got the great bone saw here and some super sharp scalpels and other little drills that were used to relieve pressure in your skull. Bit gruesome, okay? But he was a great practicing physician in the area, and his kids went on to be the solicitor to the Mount Lebanon School District for decades, and then also they were responsible, another one of his children, for pushing for Mount Lebanon to split away from Scott Township in 1912, and he led that effort. So please come see the rest of the great things we've got on display. Thanks.
Hi, I'm John Delano, a member of the Board of Trustees of the Historical Society of Mount Lebanon. And I'm here today to talk about Senior Day. No, we're not talking about the seniors, the folks who have turned gray, the older folks who live in Mount Lebanon. We're talking about high school seniors, and a day that was very special in the life of high school seniors back, 1960s and earlier. So what exactly was Senior Day? Well, it starts off being a day of recognition, a day to acknowledge all the seniors at Mount Lebanon High School and the fact that they've survived 12 years of schooling in the community. And it was a day of celebration, a way to recognize that, hey, we're at the top of our game and we're about to graduate. It was just held a week or two before graduation, and it was a very festive occasion in Mount Lebanon. You couldn't miss it if you were a resident, because at 7 a.m., the horns would honk. All the seniors would be out in their cars. They'd be traipsing all over town, up and down the streets, in decorated vehicles, honking. Honk, 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 honk. The underclassmen knew the seniors were very special, or at least they thought they were, because they were out in their cars making all kinds of noise. The other part of that day, of course, was vests. And we've got a great display of vests from 1946, 1959, and then I brought my vest from 1967. If you can imagine, the vests back then were all in various class colors. We had class colors based on, frankly, green, blue, and red. And white was the signature color for every one of these particular outfits. Now, it's hard to imagine anyone today wearing these kinds of vests. I can't fit into my vest today. I'm sure I was 25 pounds lighter way back when. But as you can see, we had a beanie, which had Mount Lebanon 67 on mine, and we had a particular, our own name and our class. That was standard on each of the vests. And you can see this was Beck's vest from 46 and Penny's vest from 59, John's vest from 67. You could decorate your vest any which way you wanted. You know, I particularly remember asking my mother to use paisley as my inner lining. I don't know why I did that. Paisley must have been really in the 1960s, but it was kind of cool, and it was certainly a little different. I decorated because I was political. I was political back then, and I decorated with buttons, political campaign buttons. Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson. President Johnson was the president in 1967. Barry Goldwater had run against him a couple of years earlier and had lost. And then I threw a couple other political buttons on because this was the year in which there was campaigning, a beginning of campaigns for 1968, which featured Hubert Humphrey and Richard Nixon. That's what these buttons are. And then, of course, you always have to have a little raunchy button. Mine wasn't particularly raunchy, but it's there on the vest itself. So we wore these vests. I still can't believe I did this, that I was wearing a vest like this and a beanie throughout Senior Day, but we did. And as I said, the day started, frankly, usually at a very early morning breakfast at somebody's house. You gathered together, you had picked out the car you wanted to be in. The cars were decorated, and I have to tell you, some of the decorations were a little bit off color. I'm not going to describe the full one, but if you can imagine a car with a fist on it on the front door, right by the window. And when the driver rolled up the window, back in those days, I think it was you had to use your hand to crank up the window. Well, a certain middle finger began to go up. I'm not going to demonstrate it for you. You get the idea. But whenever that senior drove by another senior, or even more importantly, an underclassman who deserved to be recognized in a certain way, that window would crank up real quick. You know, I think over the years we got raunchier and raunchier, and maybe, given it was the 1960s, the most provocative times, I think we had more provocative kinds of expressions on our cars. And I suspect that's one of the reasons why my class, the class of 1967, was the last day to have these kinds of recognitions as seniors. And part of it also included, my recollection is that one of my classmates drove a motorcycle right into the high school, right down the main corridor of the main old building on senior day. And that, of course, was not taken with great pleasure by the principal, Dr. Mills, or the administration. I think senior day, as we knew it back in the 60s, 50s, and 40s, came to an end after 1967, which in some ways is a shame because it was a fun day to recognize seniors. But again, all of this is something in the history of Mount Lebanon, and we really want to invite you to come to the Historical Society building on Washington Road so you can come see our exhibit, see the history of Mount Lebanon. There's so much about Mount Lebanon that is ever-changing. We've had one exhibit after another. This is really a kind of cool one. I hope you'll come and share the opportunity to see. It's been great to be with you, tell you a little bit about Senior Day. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's memories from long ago.